There's a lot going on this time of year at the Idaho Statehouse. Committee meetings, bill proposals, and key debates that could shape Idaho's future. I'm James Dawson, state government reporter for Boise State Public Radio, and I spend my days from January to April sorting through the action at the legislature so you don't have to. Sign up for my weekly newsletter, Legislative Roundup, and you'll get each week's biggest news and developments from the session delivered straight to your inbox every Monday morning. Sign up for Legislative Roundup at our website, boisestatepublicradio.org.
It's the Connector from Boise State Public Radio News. Good morning. It's Thursday, February 20th. I'm Troy Oppie. Yesterday, a very busy day at the State House. This morning on the podcast, we cover the first voucher bill to make it to the governor's desk after years of trying. Plus, lawmakers have advanced a bill that would make Idaho the only state in the country to use the firing squad as a primary method of execution. And House lawmakers passed a bill that would likely kill the state's Medicaid expansion yesterday. Plus, multiple rulings in the case against accused Moscow murderer Brian Kohberger, and we'll meet more federal employees in Idaho fired last week as part of mass workforce reductions by the Trump administration. Fair warning, this will be a very State House heavy podcast this morning. There is a lot to get to. We start with our James Dawson, who was very busy yesterday. His first report, state senators have approved a bill to spend $50 million to subsidize private school tuition.
$5,000 a year. That's how much the bill would provide in state tax credits per child. Parents could use that money to pay for things like tuition, books, and tutoring. Republican Senator Camille Blaylock says the bill should not be considered a boogeyman.
This bill is not going to defund our great public schools that we have in this state. This is just another avenue for more option in our state.
Opponents like Republican Senator Jim Guthrie say the proposal offers no accountability to taxpayers. Private schools would not have to measure how well their students are taught. Guthrie worries this money could prop up schools that teach critical race theory or support diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives.
Tax dollars could go to the exact things we fight against and fear as to what's being taught in our public schools.
Governor Brad Little has until the end of the month to decide whether to sign it, veto it, or let it pass into law without his signature. James Dawson, Boise State Public Radio News.
Legislation making Idaho the only state in the country to use a firing squad as a primary method of execution advanced out of Senate committee yesterday. Republican Senator Dan Foreman joined two Democrats to vote against the proposal, but proponents say it's needed to streamline the execution process, eliminating the need to search for lethal chemicals and the chance of failed IV insertion, as what happened during the state's most recent execution attempt last year. The Idaho Capital Sun reports a deputy from the state AG's office testified that firing squad would also lessen the likelihood of lawsuits over execution triggering a medical condition, which results in undue pain or suffering. That bill now goes to the full Senate. It has already passed the State House. Another bill which would protect journalists from being legally compelled to reveal confidential sources, notes, or other information gathered in the reporting process advanced out of a House committee yesterday with a unanimous do-pass recommendation. Idaho is one of 10 states that lack a shield law for reporters. The bill was written by and is supported by the Idaho Press Club, of which myself and other Boise State Public Radio journalists are members. Idaho's mandatory school attendance laws remain in place for now. A proposed constitutional amendment to repeal that requirement failed in the House yesterday by a single vote. The measure would have ensured a parent's right to homeschool their child without government interference. Republican Representative Dale Hawkins was the amendment's lead sponsor.
It says that the state can't authorize anyone to come into your home and tell you where to send your kids to school.
House Democratic Caucus Chair Todd Achilles feared the proposal would have opened the door for some parents to not educate their kids.
We would be the only state in the nation without compulsory education. That's an area where I don't want to lead.
Idaho law requires kids between the ages of 7 and 16 to attend some kind of school, and it requires homeschoolers teach subjects that are also widely taught in public schools. That provision could have been invalidated had the measure passed, according to those who voted against the amendment. More from our James Dawson now, as Idaho's Medicaid expansion program could come to an end under a bill passed by House lawmakers yesterday.
To keep the program alive, 11 requirements must be met by July 2026. Those include implementing work requirements, capping the number of participants, and limiting their lifetime eligibility. Idaho budgeted $82.2 million for Medicaid expansion in the current fiscal year. Republican Representative Wendy Horman, who co-chairs the state's budget committee, says that price will continue rising.
It is not sustainable, and nothing we have tried so far has worked.
All but one of the bill's requirements needs federal approval. Idaho and several other states have applied for these waivers. Those have been denied, including by the first Trump administration. That's why House Democratic leader Elena Rebell says this bill would be a death sentence for the program.
I have a better chance of flying a unicorn to the moon and back than we have of keeping Medicaid expansion if House Bill 138 becomes law.
State senators will take up the issue next. James Dawson, Boise State Public Radio News.
In other news, Ada County Judge Stephen Hippler yesterday denied a request from Brian Koberger for a Franks hearing. That's when defense alleges investigators intentionally misrepresented or omitted evidence in order to obtain search warrants. Koberger's defense claimed 17 warrants used to indict him were improperly obtained. Hippler's ruling examined those 17 warrants, divided into 13 issue-based arguments, and dismissed each as not qualifying under Franks. Hippler also issued 3 other rulings Wednesday, each a defeat for Koberger's defense. Hippler ruled that DNA evidence collected under an alleged Miranda rights violation, and evidence from electronic service providers and computer drives could not be suppressed at trial. Koberger could face the death penalty if convicted in the stabbing deaths of 4 University of Idaho students in an off-campus residence in Moscow in November of 2022. His trial, moved last year from Latah to Ada County, is set to begin in July. More now on the Trump administration's mass layoffs. Some workers are fighting back. That's the case in rural resort towns like McCall, where the Forest Service and other federal agencies are major employers and whose work is a visible part of everyday life. Here's the Mount West News Bureau's Murphy Woodhouse with more from McCall.
On Sunday, Emily Kuharski got news that many working on Idaho's Payette National Forest were expecting. She had been fired. The memo that she received, dated Valentine's Day, said her continued employment would not be in the public interest.
It felt pretty horrible. I mean, the main part of my job in the winter is safety. I ride out on snowmobiles, I check avalanche reports, I disseminate information to the public. And now I, as a resource to everyone who comes and recreates here, I'm gone.
She liked her work, as did her supervisors. She shared a recent performance review where she was deemed to be, quote, fully successful.
I've got food, I've got all of our signs, our posters, sign-up sheets, things like that.
She grabs rally materials from her car parked on Lake Street in downtown McCall and walks back to a nearby cafe where a planning meeting for an upcoming protest is underway. She also came to look for work.
I was overqualified for my job with the Forest Service, and I want to work. I want to find a job. I'm going to pass out my resume and tell people what has happened to me and ask for help.
A union steward with the National Federation of Federal Employees who works on the Payette estimated that some 50 Forest Service employees have been laid off in recent days, with dozens more in neighboring forests. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, the service's parent agency, did not confirm those local figures, but says that nationwide it has, quote, made the difficult decision to release about 2,000 probationary, non-firefighting employees from the Forest Service. Probationary employees are typically recent hires or longer-serving workers that move into new roles. Recently confirmed Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins supports the administration's efforts to, quote, eliminate inefficiencies and strengthen USDA's many services to the American people, according to a statement. Such firings have provoked similar protests across the West and legal challenges. As 11 a.m. approaches, a crowd of some 50 people gathers at a small park near snow-covered Payette Lake. Bryce Spare takes the mic.
You know, they're claiming that based on our performance that these positions are no longer in the interest of taxpayers. I take a real great offense to that.
Spare was a backcountry ranger whose responsibilities included patrolling trails and keeping bathrooms clean. Like many, he started his career doing seasonal work before getting a permanent position. That transition, workers say, can put you into probationary status. Spare says he knows fired workers who had nearly a decade of seasonal experience.
There's a ton of knowledge that's being lost right now.
By the early afternoon, nearly 150 people line Lake Street. Chants and the honks of supportive motorists fill the air.
What does your sign say?
My sign says Valley County stands with our federal workers.
That's McCall local Bethany Thomas.
You know, our neighbors, our friends, our kids' soccer coaches are federal employees. And without their income, our community doesn't have money coming into it.
Recent data from Valley County, which includes McCall, shows that the Forest Service is the area's third most important employer, besting the local school district and a major ski resort.
And I have huge concerns over what this means for our forests and our communities in the coming fire seasons.
While fire personnel are exempt from the layoffs, many non-fire staff play key roles in wildfire response.
Most of the people that were fired here recently, most of those people do get their red cards.
That's Brad LaPlante, the Payette Union Steward. A red card refers to the formal qualifications workers need for fighting wildfires. He's not a firefighter, but responded with other non-fire staff to a major 2024 blaze that shut down an interstate.
Not only are you working with fire crews, but a lot of us are in support positions.
Whether on the trails or during fire season, LaPlante says the layoffs' impacts will be felt. For the Mountain West News Bureau, I'm Murphy Woodhouse.
The Forest Service is not the only affected agency. Probationary workers with the National Park Service were also fired, including, according to the Associated Press, all but one supervising ranger at Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. There were 17 on staff before. And probationary employees with the National Wildlife Refuge System were fired. One refuge employee who didn't want to be identified for fear of retribution as she fights to get her job back told me about 55 workers in Region 1, which is Idaho, Washington, Oregon, Hawaii, and Pacific Island territories, got fired last week. They are among more than 400 refuge system workers fired across the country. That worker said the firings directly undermine the mission of the Fish and Wildlife Service, which is the refuge system's parent agency. That's The Connector on this Thursday, February 20th. I'm Troy Oppie. Our news director is Sasha Woodruff. Our guest editor in the Boise State Public Radio newsroom is Luis Clemens. Our general manager is Tom Michael. Make it a great day, and be sure to download and listen again tomorrow. We're more than just podcasts and a radio station at Boise State Public Radio. We're a trusted resource and a lifeline for communities across Idaho. It's up to all of us to safeguard public media's future. You can learn more at protectmypublicmedia.org. Together, we can ensure that Boise State Public Radio remains a trusted resource for you and your neighbors for generations to come.